Hello, everybody, and welcome to our video on trapezoids. I will tell you, this is not going to be a super detailed introduction to trapezoids. It is mostly going to be focusing on how to find the area and perimeter of one, assuming you already kind of know what a trapezoid is. But I will give you like a base rundown super fast. So a trapezoid has four sides and it has two bases that are parallel, or one pair of bases that are parallel. And that means that if you extended them forever, they would never, 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 never touch. And then the one other piece of information that is super important to know with a trapezoid is that it has a height. And as you can see in this little clip from the Virginia formula sheet, the height is shown in the middle of the shape by a dotted line that connects to the bases with right angles. And it won't always look that pretty on real life examples, but it will always form a right angle. So there's that. So when we're talking about all the pieces of this formula looks complicated, but honestly, it's pretty easy to use, especially considering we have Desmos. So the A stands for area, of course. The H stands for height, just like in a parallelogram or a triangle. And then the two B's are bases. But since there are two of them and they are different lengths, the way that we say that is we say base 1 or base sub 1 because it's a subscript 1. I just like to call it base 1 if I'm being honest. And then the second one would be base 2 or base sub 2. I pretty much always just call it base 2 if I'm being honest. So let's look at these two pictures before we dive into actually using this formula. I do have a right angle in this first one. I do not have a dotted line to represent the height, but that's because this right here is my height, and it is connecting the two parallel sides. So the top is parallel to the bottom, meaning if I keep drawing those lines, they will never, 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 never touch. And it doesn't matter which one you call base 1 and which one you call base 2. So I'm just going to do it in the same way as the picture. When things get a little bit trickier is when the trapezoids flip over onto their sides. They did give us a dotted line to show us that this is the height, but sometimes people get confused about which sides are the bases. So look for where that right angle touches. It touches this, which means that is one of my bases. And it can be base 1 or base 2. Since I'm highlighting it first, I'm going to call it base 1. And then the one opposite from that, that's going to be your other base. So I'll call that one base 2. And that's important to know when we're trying to use this formula. I'm going to go ahead and write this formula into Desmos while we're here looking at it. And I'm going to show you something. So when I go to do base 1, sometimes people think that there's something special they have to do to make that 1 go down like that. But after you type a letter, if you type a number, it automatically does that. And then plus base 2. So I got my formula in for whenever we need it. Let's go look at our examples. Ooh, this one has two questions. Okay. This says a house has two windows shaped like trapezoids. How much glass does it take to create each window? So if I'm talking about glass, I'm talking about covering this entire space. So that is definitely telling me that I need to be using the area formula. And I don't have to write it again because it's right there in my Desmos. But the more times I write something, the more comfortable my brain is going to be with it. So I'm going to go ahead and write it down. And then I'm going to look at my trapezoid because right now, basically nothing is labeled. I'm going to outline my trapezoid, in fact, because I feel like this picture is not doing me any favors. Okay, nothing is labeled in here, but I do have a right angle labeled on this other trapezoid. So that tells me I can put a right angle there. And now I know that the two sides that are being touched by that right angle, one of them is going to be a height and one of them is going to be a base. And remember, the two bases are parallel. So this is going to be one of my bases, and then this is going to be my other base, and then the side that connects them is going to be my height. So I'm going to label those on here. I'm going to call this base 1. I'm going to call this base 2. And I'm going to call this my height because it connects my two bases with a right angle. So then when I go to put things in Desmos, then my life is actually much, much, much easier. I've got my height equals 30. I know that base 1 equals 24, even though it's a little hard to see that number. And I know that base 2 equals 33, even though that one's a little bit hard to see too. And it does all the hard work of calculating for me, and it gives me 855. And then these were inches, and it's area, so I got to put a little squared there. Okay, so there's a lot of information in that question, but once you find the three numbers that you need, the rest of the work can be done in the calculator. The second question, I don't really have to calculate too much else. It just says how much glass does it take to create both windows? Well, if I know that each window is 855, I can just add those two together, or you can multiply by 2, and you get 1,710 inches squared. And that's a good little intro to what we're going to be doing next, which is putting together multiple shapes. So if I know the trapezoid on the left is 855 and the trapezoid on the right is 855, let's just add them together. And boom, there's my answer. Okay, let's look at one more trapezoid. This one says, Mrs. Etcher is decorating a trapezoid-shaped table for a class party. Do y'all's teachers have those? I know that we have some. How much ribbon will she need to go around the entire table? Well, if I'm going around something, that's perimeter. I don't need an area formula at all because perimeter is add all sides. So I'm going to clear out my Desmos and we're going to figure out how long each side is. So I know this top side is 152.4 centimeters, 152.4. That's one of my bases. I know that this side over here is 78.7. I know that this bottom side here, or this other base, is 76.2. And then here's my problem. This is a trapezoid, which means we're supposed to be adding up 4 numbers, but I only have 3 so far, and they've given me another number, but that number is a trick because this is the height, and you're not going to put ribbon on the height of the table. You want to put ribbon on this other side that I'm marking with a squiggly line. Okay? And there was a mark there before I covered it with my squiggles that said, see this little line here? That's called a congruency mark. And that tells me it's equal to this side over here that also has a congruency mark. So I'm going to add up another 78.7. And that gives me my final answer, 386 centimeters of ribbon. And there you go. There's your video on area and perimeter of trapezoids. If you have any questions, let us know. See you next time.